we have two speakers. We're able to connect one of them so far. The second speaker might now be able to join us now that we've solved this problem. So each speaker, we hope, will have 20 minutes to give their presentation. And what we're going to do is anybody who has a question can type in during that presenter's time. I will see those questions. After they're done, I will ask them individual clarifying questions, but leave general questions to the very end. So, and then again, if you have to get off the call, we will make sure that all of the questions are answered. Okay. So, now, first of all, the fun part is trying to advance the slides. Okay. So, Liz, and let me see if I can see the advance right there. Okay. All right. So, our two speakers and myself, I think we're all on the call. I'll find out soon if Young is on the call or not. But my name is Darlene Walnick, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and where I spent the last almost 10 years working with marketumbrella.org, creating and running markets and projects that build direct marketing opportunities for farmers and fishers and value-added producers. Since June, as an independent consultant, I offer technical assistance to markets and market organizations across the country. And the idea behind today's topic for Farmers Market Coalition was to delve more deeply into a subject that we don't always spend as much time as we probably should, which is the incredible growth in farmers markets and yet maybe not the commensurate growth in market vendors. So I think we've all seen the articles about markets worrying about having enough vendors, the cannibalizing of vendors from other markets, all of that. And we know we've spent a lot of time in the field the last 2 years working to remove barriers for all kinds of shoppers and encouraging people to use our markets. The growth has been incredible across the country in farmers markets. But to have enough vendors to support all the wonderful new shoppers that are finding markets, we need to find some innovative ways to do that, to attract and maintain them. And so that was the idea behind today, was allowing two speakers who have done some really amazing work with market vendors in their own communities to tell us what they do and then spark some ideas that we'd like to continue to. So continue the conversation past this webinar is obviously the idea. We can't answer all the questions or come across all the ideas in 1 hour. So we'd like to continue this offline via email with the presenters and or through Farmers Market Coalition directly. So we might, at the end of the webinar, you'll get a survey, and if you feel like we should have more surveys, more webinars on this subject, just let us know. So, you know, with our markets, we know that we offer multiple benefits to people, not just economics. And you may have heard these terms recently: economic, social, human, natural benefits that we offer as farmers markets to our communities. And really, the focus here is to think about that in relationship not just to shoppers, but also for vendors as well. There's many different ways we can attract and maintain vendor bases. If you look around the country, you see vendors that are doing tiny markets or large markets or other opportunities. So I think the question is, how do we find out about that? How do we help them in those opportunities? And one of the ways I think is to do something you see on your screen right now is a snapshot of a survey that the Neighborhood Farmers Market Alliance in Seattle, Washington does. And as we all know, most people know how to encourage, how to ask. But this is a great survey because what it does is to ask each of their market, and this is an older version of their survey, I'm sure they probably have a more recent version on their Farmers Market Coalition Resource Library. But this asks for each of their locations, here are some trends and challenges that the organizers see in the market. How, what interest level do their vendors have, and focusing on that project, do they want to help? on a challenge. And as you might have noticed, if you look at this page closely, it actually offers the vendors an incentive to actually complete the survey. A different benefit, which is asking for their leadership, and hoping that they will find that that is useful to them as well. So I encourage people to look for these. Do a survey that doesn't just talk about, you know, how did you do today? And then this, went back too far. Okay, this page that you'll see is an example of something I did in New Orleans. It's on the YouTube channel that we had at marketumbrella.org. It's still up there. And I did these 2 to 7 minute videos. Some of them are focused on giving information to shoppers. Some give information to policymakers, to community partners, and some give information to market vendors themselves. So this particular snapshot is of a video that explains how market setup goes. I think a lot of times when you invite someone to a market, they're looking at the culture of your market as well, not just the economic opportunities. You know, is there a market manager? How are they? Who are they? What kind of vendors go to that market? So this is a somewhat sweet little short, I think it's a 3-minute, 29-second video that shows a vendor what market set up on the Tuesday Crescent City Farmers Market looks like. And this is Mr. Dilby and Mr. Mizell shaking hands. And there's a narration that says, okay, you're going to show up, and there's going to be a person with a map, and there's a video of the person with the map and shows them how they set up, and when the bell rings, here's what's going to happen. And I find that these kinds of resources really bring a lot of comfort to new vendors, and they help them understand that you're really there for their good. Well, that's just a couple of quick ideas from my point of view, but I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, Peter Marks, and he's going to tell you more about his organization and in depth. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he is the program director of the local food and farm campaign at Appalachian Sustainable Agricultural Project in Asheville, North Carolina. And I worked with him at Southern Fog. We presented together on behalf of Farmers Market Coalition a few years ago, and I was very impressed by the innovative ideas he has of looking at the businesses of markets and how he and market vendors. And so when I put this together, he was one of the first 2 people I thought of. So, Peter, I hope you're ready to go.
I'm here and ready to go. Can you hear me, Darlene? Good.
Yes, I can.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am with ASAP, Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. A couple other logos on this screen will help you understand the background I'm talking from. On the bottom left is the Mountain Tailgate Market Association logo. This association of markets was formed in 2002 and still exists, has grown. It's basically about 22 markets in 8 counties in western North Carolina, mostly rural. I'm here in Asheville, which is a small city, and so that's the basis of my experience. I'm not going to talk from deep perspective about urban markets very well, but hopefully a lot of the ideas will apply. The Asheville City Market, I supported a group of farmers, and our organization supported a group of farmers in starting in 2008. It's sort of a destination-size market, about 60 vendors in downtown Asheville on Saturday mornings, and has many of the features you'd expect at a market. Do I have cursor control to advance the slides? I don't seem to.
I think it will.
You should. Let me check.
Sometimes it just takes a few minutes.
Try now.
Now I do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And here's our website. I won't dwell on this slide, asapconnections.org, to come learn more about what we do. So I'll go ahead and advance again. Yeah, can someone advance for me who's a fellow organizer, because it's my cursor isn't doing it.
It takes a few seconds, Peter, so just it's going.
Okay. All right,
going
I will. All right, so the first point I want to make is that we're focused on a certain issue, which is recruiting vendors, and it's I'll just read this wording, which is that immediately after the time when everyone is shouting that you need more vendors comes the time when everyone is shouting that you have too many vendors. This is true in any market, and it's really smart if you can anticipate this and not get so excited when you're recruiting vendors that you end up making mistakes, such as recruiting too many of the same thing, recruiting a mix you don't want, and that sort of thing. So before I start getting into building a solid vendor base, I wanted to talk about the fact that look ahead to the time when you're going to be putting on the brakes and wanting to maybe be careful about who's in that base and so on, and be careful about the level of competition between vendors in relation to the customer base. So just keep that in mind. You also want to define your goals in forming a vendor base. You know, I see different markets really having different goals. So, for example, if your main goal is having vital, growing, thriving farms, then absolutely you want to focus on bringing in, you know, every working farm you can that's trying to make a living on a farm. You know, if your goal is more neighborhood revitalization, then something like bringing in people with community gardens to be vendors is going to be more valuable for your market, and that's not going to compete with the farm preservation goal as much as it would if that was your main goal. If your goal is food access for a specific neighborhood, you know, maybe the vendor mix that you need is different than it is if you're trying to attract tourists naturally. So make sure everyone's on the same page and define this before you even go into vendor recruitment. All right. A couple tips on the sort of mechanics of vendor recruitment. Give yourself enough time. I get 10 calls every spring from businesses and community organizers and people who want to start a market that year. I pretty much always tell them it's impossible, and then, you know, let them be pleasantly surprised if they actually pull it off. So, you know, work at least a year ahead in terms of new markets. I know we probably have a mix of markets on the phone in terms of new and old. This is a really simple tool, a vendor interest form, but a lot of people seem to benefit from the idea just that you create a page that says, hey, fill this out and let me know that you might be interested in vending at this market, and ask, you know, what would you sell, what days would work for you. Even, you know, in the year or two after a market exists, keep distributing these and collect them, and it becomes a way that you develop a means of communication. In general, in terms of recruiting vendors, I want to make a couple points. One is there's a lot more farms than you think. In our little 23 western counties in North Carolina where we work, there's 12,000 farms. 11,000 plus grow nothing that could be sold at a farmer's market. In our case, that's, you know, beef cattle for auction, hay for those cattle, tobacco, Christmas trees that are shipped on trucks out of the region, etc. In your region, it might be something else. However, these farms are watching and considering this movement and waiting for the point where farmers markets might be something they could do to diversify their land and so on. I think in considering who might be a vendor at our markets, we often narrowly look at who is already sort of hip to the world of farmers market vending, and don't realize that this bigger group is out there. And in fact, many of the people I think who are best positioned to come in and really be a great vendor off the bat are people who understand a good scale of production in some other type of marketing and have never been a farmer's market farmer. So keep that in mind. And on that tip, you know, I think using the sort of old guard farmer resource institutions, and I've listed here on this slide 5 or so who are relevant where I live, that's who I would go to first, not before I would, you know, go poke around other farmers markets and see, okay, who's vending. I think both are important, but yes, I would look to these old guard institutions. All right, next slide. All right, I'm going to give you 7 ideas related to finding the right vendor base. And this photo is from the Yancey County Farmers Market in Burnsville, NC. And I have nothing more to say about that. So next slide. All right, number 1. I feel like there's a couple thoughts about how a market is managed, and that can make a big difference in terms of recruiting and attracting and keeping vendors. What I see is there's a strong management model where you're really providing a model where drama is reduced. There's a highly professional level of management. There's not a lot of vendors all voting on whether X, Y, or Z is going to happen. And then there's a model where the vendors do have a strong voice and are asked to contribute heavily in the management of the market. And I'd say in both of those camps, there are vendors out there who are fed up with one or the other and who either are looking for a market where there's less drama or looking for a market where they can have more of a voice. And if you clearly define yourself as to where your market is in relation to those polls, I think that can help you draw vendors. By the way, that's Mike, our market manager on the left, and that is get your picture taken with a rain goat day at the Asheville City Market a couple years ago. Tip 2, newer, smaller markets may not even want, quote, the best vendors yet. What we see is farms that are well established and understand that they don't want to go to a market unless they hit a certain magic number of sales will try new markets. And a couple things will happen. One is they'll try you for a few weeks and then drop you, which can be difficult for the market. And number 2 is, the larger, more established, quote-unquote, best farms or other types of vendors to have at your market. If your market is a lesser market for them, they might send an intern or a less experienced sort of person to represent their farm or other type of business at your market. And so don't assume that because farm or vendor XYZ has this great display over across town or in the next town that you actually want that vendor at your market. And so just a little shift in mindset there. And I'm going to advance the slide now. Thank you. And so along those same lines, just 1, 2. All right, and so newer farmers should expect to grow with their markets and help them to succeed. And I hear a lot of frustration about this from established vendors who have been at farmers markets from their origin around here 25 or 30 years ago, saying, boy, we stood around for years in empty parking lots building this thing, and boy, today's vendors expect to be able to show up at a market and go great guns from the beginning. There's some degree to which newer markets or smaller markets or less established markets and newer or less established vendors can repeat that pattern of growing together. That's going to be the best match. And some of that, I think, takes reminding the vendors in their community that this is sort of part of their role is to grow the market hand in hand with the market. On to number 4. A couple ideas. Number 1, I think it can work for a market to define who can vend more tightly and use that for promotional advantage. What do I mean by that? Markets in certain areas, I think 5, 10 years ago, almost everybody representing a farm at the market was the farmer. It was the person who built that farm from scratch. It was the person who decided what would be planted. It was the person who, first came to that market, and the idea that somebody else would represent the farm at the market was not there. This is an aspect of producer only that our market that we run is dealing with, of sort of, do you lose some of that producer-only feeling depending on who is representing your vendors at the market? How deep of a conversation about the product or the history of the farm or the business can a customer expect to have with that person? a new market can boldly step up and say, listen, we're only going to accept vendors or new vendors who really are the farmer person, and then know that the experience that you're going to be providing your customers is really going to be distinctive, and they're going to have that farmers market experience, and that your market isn't going to have 10 of the same vendors that is at the other market across town, that it's, people are going to want to come there for unique and distinctive products. On the other end of that pole is you could define who can vend more loosely. Like I said, I haven't worked in the big cities, but when I travel down to the real hot and humid parts of, say, eastern North Carolina, I really learned something interesting, which is, sometimes a market is trying to establish, it's trying to get a critical mass of vendors and customers. The people don't have another good way to get fresh produce or whatever other products, and they'll find entrepreneurs who want to go to the farms and get the product and resell it. And that's kind of a dirty word in some market circles, but like I said, it depends what your goals are with the market. I think you can write rules and guidelines that would partially prevent a race to the bottom in pricing in that situation. And so this is sort of the polar opposite of the previous slide, another idea that a market could establish a critical mass of vendors and go out there and just find entrepreneurs to provide a certain product that it's missing who don't necessarily produce that product. And that might be a strategy that works for you. All right, slide 6, provide farmer and, or idea 6, farmer and vendor business planning and marketing support, develop your vendors. I show this slide, it's from a farm that sells at Asheville City Market called 10 Mile Farm. And the point that Kevin and Christina would make if they were here talking is this beautiful display that you're looking at, they've been farming for 5 or 8 years, and a smart couple, and they could not have A, grown this range of product, or B, displayed it this well 3 years ago because they just hadn't learned how yet. They didn't have the experience. This goes back to my previous point of, to some degree, newer or less established markets are going to kind of be the farm team and be growing together. And your vendors who you're not that excited about being an anchor vendor today might be that wonderful anchor vendor in 3 years. And so there's just that. Anything else you can do to accelerate that process is great. I want to shoot you 3 sub-ideas here, especially since the subtitle of this whole webinar is Markets as Business Incubators. First idea on this subject. Bring customer experts onto any board or vendor leadership committee that your market has. A lot of markets have some type of leadership group that is only vendors. There are great reasons to bring in a customer perspective that go above and beyond the focus of this webinar. But one of the reasons is you could select those people to be local people with great expertise in retail and merchandising. You could select those people to be CPAs, people with experience using QuickBooks, people with legal expertise. Any of these things, if you can put such people in the community close to your vendors by having them serve alongside in that sort of community representatives on either your board or your vendor committee, that's a wonderful way to sort of engineer that. And I mentioned record keeping, which I really think if you're going to train vendors in anything, getting everybody using QuickBooks is one of the great ways to do business development at a market. I also mentioned merchandising and salesmanship. I think that vendors can do a better job growing with your market if they get basic salesmanship training. And we're not inventing any of the wheels here, and I'll say more about that in a minute. My number 2 idea on kind of markets as incubators: ask your vendors to share their numbers. And some people will say you're crazy, and what I mean by that is sort of the benchmarks, the financials of their farm or other business. And some people will say you're crazy. No, that's proprietary personal information. but you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 will be proud to say, yeah, this is what my labor costs, this is what costs go into my inputs into the ground, this is how much I sell at market, this is how much I sell another way, and this is how much is left for me in profits. And start to build a library of that kind of information, what you might call benchmarking in the typical business, and share that around. And I think you will find people who say, yeah, I'm willing to share that. Heck, if someone else, you know, wants to work as hard as me in the same kind of niche I'm in, you know, me sharing my numbers or not is not going to make that any different. By doing that, you'll avoid people making just really obvious mistakes like setting their prices too low to ever make a living and realize that 5 years down the road, and in the meantime having underpriced everybody else at market. The third concept I wanted to bring up on this slide is that we are not inventing any of the principles being used at farmers markets, and I think we tend to make a mistake of thinking we're inventing all this stuff for the first time. I think about worlds like craft shows, which I have been in, that are extremely well developed, have had trade publications for 20 years. I think about retailers, salespeople, you know, all of these industries have great things that we in markets can learn from and study. And so as market organizers, I think part of our job is to say, okay, who's doing sales? You know, let's cross-fertilize with some craft show people and learn the best messages they have. And with that, I'm moving on to the next slide here. Idea number 7. I think that we as markets are too much all the same. The way I kind of say that is it's California everywhere. Some of this can be addressed with events and so on. That's not today's subject. It can also be addressed with special kinds of vendor outreach. You know, are there new kinds of markets? Could you be a market where there's a whole lot of seafood from, you know, family scale fisheries? Could you be a market where, you know, there's always a wonderful selection of local baked goods and you present yourself in your marketing as the best bakery in town? Could you be a market where there are certain specialty items that tie into a specific health interest or a specific cultural diet, and you bring in, you know, a combination of producers and just plain old vendors who are good at selling that kind of product? Think about how your market might be a new kind of market. If everybody in your town is trying to get the same kind of vendors, instead of playing that game, maybe part of your answer is, I'm going to play a different game, and that's how I'm going to succeed. And I'm right at my 10 minutes, and that's good because I'm right at my last slide. So let's see, one more. Closing thought, are we saturated with farmers markets? And this is something that's said at times lately. There was an article in the New York Times. My answer is no, and very much related to the last slide. I think people feel that way because we're at this point where this has become a real business. And as a real business, there's competition. Just because you have a farmer's market doesn't mean you're can count on succeeding, are entitled to succeed. Like any maturing industry, we've now gotten popular enough that more people are doing it than perhaps there's a customer base, and it's that entrepreneurial creativity that I've been suggesting in these last few slides that's going to help your market bring in more different new types of customers, new types of vendors, new strategies that are going to grow the market for everybody. I think there was a time in probably about 1983 when people said, wow, we have too many personal computer companies. And, you know, I make an analogy with that. We did for the moment because the whole movement had to grow. And if we're in a moment like that, it doesn't mean we're at an end point. It means, in a sense, we're at a beginning. And I think the last slide is just my contact info. And that's my 20 minutes. So thank you all very much. And I think, Darlene, are we taking a couple questions here?
Yeah, I'm not. We're so far. You were so thorough. We don't have any questions yet, but I think people will type as we go. We're going to put up a poll in a second for folks to do while we're segueing to the next speaker. And again, we'll be doing. There you go. We'll be doing questions at the end. And of course, if you want to email us questions, we will make sure that we answer them all. So no need to, freak out if you're thinking we don't need questions, but we're happy to clarify if we need to. That was great, Peter. Thanks so much. And we're going to move to Young Kim, our next speaker. And Young Kim is the Executive Director of the Fondy Food Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Again, he'll tell you about his organization and himself. He also serves with me on the board of the Community Food Security Coalition, so both he and I have a little jet lag from just finishing up the Oakland conference. But we're here, and we're happy to be back in our Farmers Market Coalition world as well. And one of the ways I like to describe Young's work is something that I'm paraphrasing his version of it, but his wonderful work at the Fondy Food Center, which also inspired me when I first met him and heard him speak a few years ago, was he says often that his work is 2 miles deep and 2 zip codes wide. And I think that's a fantastic way to look at his type of organizing and his particular interest in making sure that his neighborhood and his community is served, but also that his vendors are served. So I'm going to turn it over to Young.
Thank you, Darlene.
You're welcome.
All right, I am looking to advance a slide. All right. Yeah, my name is Young Kim. I've been the Executive Director of the Fondy Food Center since 2003. Yeah, I have a cold. If I sneeze, I apologize. One of the nice things about having a cold, though, is that I can do a mean Barry White imitation when I have a cold. Okay, so our mission is to connect Greater Milwaukee to local fresh food from the farm to the table. And so, we're all about access to food on the north side of Milwaukee. We've got 4 full-time employees and 5 part-time seasonal folks. This is your typical corner store in Milwaukee. You can see the snow there, so it gives you a sense for our short growing season. By the way, I really don't like the term food desert. It kind of implies that nothing good is happening in a neighborhood, but really food access is an issue, and corner stores like this one do a lot of retailing in the community. This is a slide, the latest data on food stores in Milwaukee. The red bar is the lower socioeconomic groups. Really, the lower income, the more tendency you have to have a food market store with fewer than 5 employees. So that kind of gives you a picture of what we're up against. And so we have the Fondy Farmers Market located in the heart of the inner city. Right now, we're open 4 days a week from June to Thanksgiving. Around 29 vendors. It fluctuates. Total sales of about $450,000 per year, approximately $100,000 in WIC Farmers Market voucher sales, and then $30,000 in food stamp sales. When I came on in 2003, the market, there was a lot of reselling going on. I saw bananas, pineapples, and also selling ineligible produce with WIC vouchers. So, and there were some real neighborhood issues that we've had to really work on. And one of the issues that we're working on now is trying to incorporate more of a vendor voice into the day-to-day farmers market operations. I seem to have lost my ability to advance the slide. Can someone advance it for me? There we go. Oops. Back one. Can you go back one? Okay. Now my control seems to be back. And so we do have some really good farmers, lots of Asian vendors. Our market is kind of a cultural crossroads in what is normally a very, very segregated city in Milwaukee. And this is a favorite quote of mine. It kind of sums up the philosophy: play the hand you're dealt. Some others may have heard, if life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. We all have constraints that we are trying to work with, and really it's about doing the best with what you have. A more pessimistic view of a farmer's market like ours, here are some of the things that people might say or do say about our farmer's market when they look at a community that has limited resources. But then there's another view of the farmer's market as opportunities. The glass half full. We have a lot of potential for food stamp and farmer's market voucher sales. We can attract more affluent customers from other parts of Milwaukee or even outside Milwaukee because our prices are priced to move stuff. People do know how to do whole foods cooking in our community, we've found. And, the second or third tier farmers, so-called second or third tier farmers, still have, I think, a lot of strength. We've been selling food with food stamps and EBT since 2003. And we went from around $600 in sales in 2003. And this year, I'm waiting for the numbers, but I think we broke through the $30,000 barrier. Up until 2007, we had about 15 machines, one assigned to each farmer. And then in 2008, we went with just one centralized machine at the Farmers Market Information Tent. And that, I think, really was the way to go. I think if we were to do it again, we would go with just one machine. I attribute the increases more to word of mouth and the economy tanking than any advertising that we did. We spent about $1,000 per year on just advertising our EBT capability from 2003 to 2006. And you can kind of see that it really went slowly. And then the economy went south, and then things started to take off. Another thing that has driven our increase in food stamp sales has been our market match program. Most of you are familiar with WIC, having farmers market vouchers. Every year for the past 2 years, we have been offering a one-to-one match, so your $5 WIC voucher becomes $10. And I raised $20,000 this year and $20,000 last year, and so we've really, it's been incredibly popular, and I think that there has been a lot of spin-off benefit from that into food stamp sales. One warning about market match type matching is that I think that once you start doing it, you need to remember that you are kind of on a fundraising treadmill where there is that expectation in the community now that we are going to be doing a WIC match all the time. So there is a bit of a commitment that you're making to every year raising funding to fuel this matching program. We do a lot to support neighborhood food traditions. We have an annual Fondy barbecue cook-off where 12 backyard barbecue chefs go head-to-head to see who has the best barbecue. We do that in conjunction with our opening day celebration, and here are some very happy barbecue judges going through and judging all of the barbecue. We also have what's called the Fondy Greens Throwdown. Collard greens are a real southern staple. Most of our customers are African American with roots in the American South, and so we have a similar cooking contest for collard greens and mustard greens. And here is a shot. Well, let's see. Come on. Of the judging table, and we bring in chefs from all over Milwaukee. The woman in the pink shirt is one of the matriarchs of a local soul food restaurant serving as a judge. We also have a Taste the Season weekly cooking demonstration program with easy to prepare, inexpensive seasonal recipes that people can use. So we're trying to expand the comfort zone of people. Some people may not be familiar with sugar snap peas, and this is a really quick recipe to just try some new stuff at the farmers market. We've also got, this is your typical Fondy farmer, Hmong, from Southeast Asia. Until starting at around 2005, we started losing a lot of farmers. And so we began to investigate why why we were losing farmers. And we started visiting them out in the fields, and really it was one of the best things that we've done. We found that the farmers were paying up to $400 an acre per season, when the going rate is about $125 to $150. They had very little farming equipment. The largest piece of machinery that we would see would be like a rototiller. Lots of farmers had an acre here, 2 acres there, and really it's a difficult way to farm when you have to drive between 2 or 3 plots of land to get enough acreage for yourself. And the profit margins were fairly thin. So we wrote a grant to the USDA CFP program. CFP stands for Community Farm Projects. This is 40 acres in Port Washington. We are farming 40 acres now. We're going to go to 63 acres next year and then 80 acres the following year. This is about 30 minutes north of Milwaukee. We've got 7 farmers paying about $150 per acre. There's a long-term commitment to the land that they're making, so there is a lot of reinvesting into the soil quality that our farmers were not doing before because they had just these 1-year handshake leases. We have tractors, and we're putting in irrigation as well as hoop houses next year. Here's a early shot of cabbage coming up this spring, and then a flowering cabbage a couple months later. The land has turned out to be really good for onions for some reason, and this onion here is about the size of a baby's head. One thing I want to talk about is, evaluation of farmers. Coming from a Western tradition, we are a lot about farmer profits. But this is a quote from one of the sons of one of our Hmong farmers. This is a population that has gone through a lot of turmoil. They've come to this country from refugee camps, and depression and PTSD is a big issue. And so when our farmers are happiest, they're often out in the field, and they can reconnect with their culture and their cultural traditions. And really, how do you measure that? I'm putting this out there because that's not the only way. Metrics aren't the only way to evaluating farmers and farmers markets. I think that there are some social aspects and psychological aspects that are tougher to measure. And then finally, coming down the home stretch here, yeah, being about food access and about culture, I've come to think about food in three ways. Food is nutritious. This is an aspect of food that a lot of dietitians live in. People who are on diets are really paying attention to the nutrition of the food that they eat. We've also got an aspect of food where food is meaningful. It's culture, it's home, it's comfort food. You know, Paula Dean from Food TV, she tends to just live here, talking about comfort food and food traditions. Another aspect of food is that it has to be available, not just available but affordable. And so people involved in the logistics of food, warehouse manager from your local grocery store, farmers, you know, they're thinking about food in this aspect. And I think that if you can put all three together, if we can put all three together, where food is nutritious, food is available, and we're paying attention to the cultural food traditions present in the customer base of the farmers market, if we can live in that sweet spot, I think our organization will be successful. And then the final point is that I really believe better is better. Every farmer's market has issues. Every farmer's market has some challenges. But really, even if you're just a one farmer's market, you know, better is better. Having a one farmer or two farmer's market is better than having nothing. Competition, as Peter was saying, is, I think, a good thing. It forces you to know yourself, and I think evaluating your competition is important. So I think that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple questions. Can you hear me, Young?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we got a couple questions for you. One of the things I wanted to ask first was that I'm going to ask you to clarify, you mentioned when you went to work with farmers in your community that they were paying $400 or so, and you mean to rent farmland, is that correct?
Yeah, they were renting farmland on handshake leases, verbal leases, and on a couple of occasions I've known some to get kicked off their land, or the farmer comes in and just plows stuff under by mistake. Okay. And so there were very little legal recourse that you can take if your lease is just a handshake.
Yeah. And the first question for you, Young, is you used the term ineligible produce with a WIC voucher, and somebody asked, can you explain what that means?
WIC vouchers in Wisconsin, WIC farmers market vouchers have to be used to purchase Wisconsin grown. So if you're selling a banana or a pineapple, the last time I checked, nobody's doing that and growing that in Wisconsin. That's a violation. In fact, the first year, the state threatened to come down on me really hard because you know, an undercover agent purchased a taffy apple using a WIC voucher, and you know, she said, she told me you're going to get one strike, not three. So,
well, that's a good point. Right, and so of course, many of these vendors, I assume, for many markets, your vendors also maybe selling at roadside stands. So if you're helping them learn the rules of the game in your market, that's going to help them as well. The other question is, and I hope both Young, you can answer this quickly first, and then Peter can come back on because he actually answered it in here. Can anyone discuss access to commercial kitchen as a hurdle, commercial using incubators? And as I said, to business incubation, any solutions, you know, the issue of if you wanted value-add product, and most states or cities require that you have access to commercial kitchen. I think with that, I do think that question requires a separate webinar, but we can answer that quickly. So Young, how do you help your vendors do on value-added, and then if Peter can answer as well.
For our organization, it's value-added. We haven't gotten to that yet. our farmers, I have found, want to mainly just farm. Getting them to think outside the box and think about really being entrepreneurial, we're not there yet. So.
Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was just going to say, I sent a private answer to that, and what I said was a couple things. First of all, there is a nonprofit shared-use commercial kitchen in our community that is used by quite a few market vendors, and the name of that is Blue Ridge Food Ventures. And then the other thing that I see people doing is making fee arrangements with everything from church kitchens to restaurants that are closed 2 days a week or 1 or 2 meals a day to basically use commercial kitchens that are not at their own home site to entrepreneurially produce products.
Right, and then of course in Ohio, in Athens, Ohio, there is, I can't remember the name of this blank there, but Leslie Schaller, who used to be he's actually a board member of Farmers Market Coalition in Athens, Ohio, has a business incubating actual commercial kitchen. And then I know that the wonderful folks in Los Angeles just opened at Key Lot, just opened a kitchen that they're actually using it to produce take seconds from farmers and produce value-added products, as well as a demonstration kitchen. So I think that's exciting. I think there are a lot of examples of commercial kitchens. I think, you know, it is a strategy that's kind of city by city, state by state, so I don't know if we have one answer for you, but we can explore that further, and we will as we go through the questions. And then the next question looks like, this looks like for Young, is it possible to access information about the 40-acre grant-funded rental model? So your wonderful farm that you've just started, Young, why don't you give us a couple of seconds on that and about how you came up with that and how you got funding for that?
Well, I knew that farmland access was, I was really worried about farmland access threatening the long-term health of our market, because everything we do is around farmers markets. So I just started talking to folks at land trust meetings and with local philanthropists, and just pointed out the need for land. That land is owned by one of Milwaukee's prominent philanthropists, and that really, I started working on the land access issues about 4 years ago, and then things finally just magically started to come together. And then the CFP project, which is an annual USDA program, we just decided to go for it, and we got a 3-year, I think it's 3 years and $290,000 over 3 years to get that farm going. So that's been huge.
This question, I guess this is for Young because it's a food stamp question, which means your numbers. It says, why is the total food stamp income so low? Is it because of the segregation you mentioned? I'm not quite sure if someone who sent that wants to clarify, but I'm not quite sure what that. Young, do you have any sense of what that might be? Fine.
Well, $30,000. I don't know. It's a nice. It's maybe low as a percentage of overall sales. Farmers markets are not convenient. We're open 4 days a week, but it's not like you can just say, oh, I need to get some milk. Let's go to the farmer's market. Chances are when you want to get some milk or some vegetables, the farmer's market may not be open. So there is that aspect to farmers markets not being as convenient as a retail store. But 30,000, I hope that we get to 50. But I think it's on the upper side of the scale as far as farmers markets go.
Right. It is. It is. Let me get to this really important. I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say a couple things. I mean, One is just for those on the call who haven't seen it, there's a graph of food stamp sales at farmers markets, and the peak was 1994, I think, is the peak year, and it went off a cliff from that point, and that's when the electronic processing started. Farmers markets have been recovering their food stamp user base since, very slowly and gradually, and we're still way below where we were in 1994. So I think some of us tend to see this as a new thing people are talking about when actually, we're still playing recovery, which I think is interesting. We did about 15,000 in sales at our market last year, open 1 day a week in food stamps. I just think there's only so much potential, but we can all work hard to grow it, and we are.
Yeah. Well, let me get to this in question because I think it's kind of key, and it maybe we're, this particular person, I was drawn to this webinar because you mentioned strategies for keeping vendor commitment while they built their businesses up to their economic goals. I'm not hearing those strategies. Can you suggest any? As I think both of you can see, I wrote back, but I want to talk about it. I think if we're not being clear, what we're saying is there are social reasons, human capital reasons that vendors apply. They may want to be included in governance. They may want to hear about grant opportunities. They may need help, they may have an issue with their farmland. They may need technical assistance, which you might want to bring on your board. These are some of the suggestions that both Young and Peter and I have come up with. But if you guys, obviously, this is really the key of the work here.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
We do have a specific, at the market we run, we do have a specific mechanism to incentivize vendors coming when they said they were going to come, which I don't know if that's an answer to the question or not. But what Mike set up there is that it's interesting. If you're a member vendor, you pay a membership fee at the beginning of the year to have guaranteed dates, and you say which dates you want to come. And then you have a chance later in the year when you can revise that process and say, oh, I'm actually not coming these dates, or I want to add these. But beyond that one opportunity, there's basically a rule that says if you don't come, whatever sort of after a 10 or 20% buffer that he gives you, however many dates you came, we can't commit to giving you more than that number of dates the next year.
Oh.
So in other words, if you committed to 40, you get a 10% buffer down to like 36, and then let's say you only came for 25, we're only going to guarantee you 25 dates the next year. And then you'd have to kind of fill in as a day vendor if you actually wanted to come more than that, and not have as guaranteed a space or day. And that seemed like a smart sort of natural consequences way that Mike incentivized people sticking with it. And then, the very fact of there being a member rate versus a day vendor rate also encourages people to either make a clear commitment or not. If they're a member, they've paid $100 in the beginning of the year, and I think it will create an incentive for them to feel more ownership and stick with it, while, as the questioner asks, they work toward their economic goals. Whereas if they're just trying the market, we have a day vendor category where they're paying a higher daily fee, but they don't pay that annual fee. So I know those are a couple more kind of mechanistic sort of answers maybe to the question. I'm not sure.
Well, I think, and I'll answer that. I'd like to hear your point of view. I think that's the same strategy that a lot of markets tried. We did that as well. We have a day rate, and New Orleans at a regular rate, which, and again, these things happen, so we're not saying you can't come, but a lot of people will. I think also the question is just to, especially at the beginning, to really delve into what is the commitment. Why do people, what is reducing their commitment? It isn't only always sales. Sometimes something happened, a situation that needs to be addressed, and if you call the vendor, especially new vendors, after they're done, and again, I think the main way to do this is to come to each vendor at the beginning and say, how was the day? How are you? What happened? Maybe even call them afterwards, because really they're not all going to answer you while they're standing in the market. They may tell you the day was great, but they actually had an issue. They want to talk to you privately. So just be sensitive that there are different cultural ways to communicate to especially new vendors, and it's going to take a year. Sometimes, I always say really for new vendor, my experience was that I didn't expect that someone actually was committed to the market in the first 6 months of coming, unless there was just a slam dunk as far as sales for them. Even that, it's a whole different change in their life, and maybe they didn't even plan on being that successful, and they didn't have that many days available to them. So really just the matter of question is really doing the survey and really checking back with your vendors to find out exactly what's going on, and maybe even using vendors who are what we like to call unelected mayors in our market, who are, you know, the elders, and maybe the vendors talk to them and tell them what they feel or what the comfort level is. So just kind of listening to the culture of the vendors. So Young, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I guess I can only speak to the experience that I've had in our market. There are economic goals that our vendors have, but there are also social and other kinds of goals, reasons why they keep on farming. And so, you know, keeping vendor commitment, you know, there are other ways besides just economics. You know, having a good relationship with a farmer, getting to know their family, you know, going to funerals when they have a death in the family. You know, there are just many ways to connect with vendors, not just on an economic scale, but social as well. And also, you know, I don't know about other folks here, but we have a large farmers market in the area that's quite successful, but the manager is a bit of a curmudgeon, and you know, he's been doing this for a long time. And I think that one advantage that we have is that we are not as curmudgeonly with our vendors. We try to be friendly and open, and you know, we value a good relationship with them. So you could go the rules route and just you know, just talk about rules and nothing else, or you can also have another aspect to the relationship that goes beyond just money and economics.
I think that's great, Young. I think right. What we're saying all throughout this is that just saying the same strategy that you think about. And I think first of all, you have to address with vendors that yes, economic, you know, success is their goal. I mean, that is why they're there. But I have certainly seen vendors around the country who are really happy with their community, with their family at the market, and it's because you have to encourage more than one culture. Yes, there's the market manager running the market and having a map, or however you do it, running the market, about who volunteers or what have you, but the vendors themselves have a culture. And if you encourage it, if you find ways to help them find support, and yes, do technical assistance. I think if you look at Peter's organization's website, you're going to see a lot of interesting resources, all from FMC website and markandumbrella.org's website about vendor relationships. I talked about the videos earlier ago, the videos at Mark and Umbrella. There's a great one from a fisherman talking about why she started to come to market. And again, I've known her for years. Until I edited that, I never had heard why she had found the market and how she had found it. And she had found it through an ad in the paper. And, you know, she just, you know, it took her a while to become a regular, but it's a great little piece on that video that may help you understand that as well. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions. So there's one more question, but I think I'm going to, like I wrote back, we're going to answer that one offline. It's about the state of Wisconsin and matching funds, which I think we can answer in the questions, because we're actually just about over time. And we're going to, again, this will be archived. We'll send it out to everybody. We thank everybody for waiting for us to get this webinar going, but you'll be able to watch and listen to the whole webinar later, and we're going to send out the list of questions again with all of the answers. And we will, of course, we have a couple of surveys to send to you and ideas around the subject. If there's a piece of this you'd like a little more information, we'll just ask. We are always thinking of ideas for Farmers Market Coalition's monthly webinars. I think, Liz, your next one is I think December 7th at this point, the next webinar that FMC has planned. I'm not sure if it's up there yet. But thank you everybody. Thank you, Young and Peter and Liz, for making this happen. And
thank you.
We look forward to talking to all of you.
The organizer